Gonna let this car sit in my driveway for, I don't know, a month or two, and looks like it has a leak. Front, it's right about where I left it. Rear, the fully down position. About time to put it on the lift, see where that leak is. Well, I bled the air out of the air tanks and found out that the front end dropped again. So that was the same problem I was having before in a previous video. It sat outside for maybe a week. And I came back outside and I noticed the rear was where it was supposed to be. It was right where I set it. The front was on the ground. And it ended up being something that was just on the seat of that inexpensive valve body I bought in there. Put it under the magnifier and see what we see. Oh wow, look. So I decided this isn't a really good idea to run an old tank. Now that tank I bought about years ago, and it came off an old compressor and it was all rusty inside, and tried to clean it out with some water and that kind of thing, and I think it just made the rust problem worse, and I hope I didn't contaminate my other two tanks back there. But anyway, I'm going to replace it with this. So this is going to be a lot of work to actually change the tank out, because I welded brackets on that thing, and I put some nutsers in there so it bolted right into place, and it had a 3-point mount and that kind of thing. It's really kind of a shame that I have to get rid of that. But I've purchased this tank here. It's an aluminum tank. Looks like it'll work really well. It has 4 delivery ports on the front, 2 on the sides, and 1 on the bottom for a drain and that kind of thing. So I think what I'm going to do is I purchased a whole mess of these brass fittings here. The copper tubing I'm using is a special copper tubing used for automotive things, and I think it's supposed to resist cracking and that kind of thing. So we'll have to support. I've kind of looked at how I'm going to do this, and you can see where there's individual valves. And so rather than have that whole valve body that kind of plugged in there, it was very convenient. I'm going to be switching over to something like this, to where, yeah, you can handle a lot more air, but also it's going to be all connected with copper tubing, so there's not going to be any problems with, you know, plastic line breakage later on, especially where you have the suspension system set up to where if the car is lowered all the way, it's on the ground. Not going to be able to drive the car. So that's a problem, and I aim to fix that. So, think thing to do, tear the old one out, get the old one out of there, tear all that plastic line out of there. Everything we did last time on the last video, we're going to be pulling all that out and then replacing it with this aluminum tank here. Have to fabricate some mounts because the mounts they give you aren't going to quite work for what we have, but that's okay. This thing will clamp right in there, and then use this whole mess of fittings to put it all together. This isn't going to be cheap. Each time I buy, you know, 10 fittings in a bag, it costs me, you know, $20, $25. And so you can see by everything I have here, probably have a couple $100 in fittings. Anyway, let's pull that thing out. Here's the 2 tanks we took out of it. That's the aluminum tank. That's of course, the old steel tank that's rusty inside. I think I'm gonna strip all this plumbing off of here, and then maybe take this valve off of here. Is probably all I'm gonna use. But you can see the difference. You know, it's got different outlets for this. Will go to the other tank, and these right here will go to my individual valves. So it's gonna be real clean setting it up with this aluminum tank here. Plus we won't have all the rust that's in here contaminating everything all the time, and well, I look forward to that. Alright, with the exception of this, pretty much all that was in my trunk. So you can see I have these plastic lines here. Of course, I'm going to turn these into copper, so I won't be needing these anymore either. So this is what we have for valving. This is really, really common out there, and most all of the airbag systems use something like this, to where, you know, it's got 1/4-inch NPT outputs and inputs, and also it has 1/8-inch NPT sense ports, so you can plug in an electronic sensor and figure out exactly what your pressures are in the front and the rear. And we're going to be getting away from that because, you know, I had a previous video I made. Each one of these has a pressure sensor, so you don't have to send any kind of air lines up into the front to be able to tell what's going on back here. I'm going to want to get away from this kind of thing completely. Maybe something like this would be good, maybe in a smaller application, but there's just so much to go wrong inside of here. Not that there isn't certainly here, but you don't have the plastic line problem that you had. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to bend up some copper tubing. In this case, I bent this piece up here. It's going to hook into here. Now there's many different ways you can do this. This is a 5-port manifold, and you can set these solenoid valves anywhere you want them, really, and have the input and the output go whatever direction you really want them to go. So this offers almost an infinite amount of possibilities. What we're going to do is we're going to probably hook the 2 air pumps into the smaller tanks here, and then connect through the end to these smaller tanks from the big tank here, and then we'll tap right here 1/2-inch MPT lines for our valving, and we'll keep all the lines and everything as far back in the trunk as possible. Now this is kind of a problem because you can see here that I had to make a bracket. I couldn't really mount the thing this way, and I couldn't mount it that way because I can't get inside of there to drill and put some inserts in there. So kind of what I have to do is all the bolting has to be done in the front. So I made kind of an L-shaped bracket, something that looks like that. I'll probably just clean up the edges, paint this black, and unfortunately you're going to see this, but there's really nothing I can do. You know, you're going to have to get these fasteners here to clamp this thing down, especially if you want to remove this thing. So everything has to be really kind of removable and repairable if you want this whole thing to last. And not only that, putting it together has to be kind of easy to understand how to take it apart. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll put this tank in there, kind of get this valving kind of where I want it, and then I'll figure out exactly where my copper tubing is going to go for the rear. And I think that that's a valve set that I have there. And then this will be the front. And that'll go single line all the way to the front. This relay was running both of these pumps here. And it didn't pop the fuse or anything like that. I had a 40 amp high current fuse in there. But it did short the relay out. So I think I'm going to use individual fuses inside of a relay. And I think I've used those before. They work pretty good. So you can see here on this small tank here, we're going to get rid of these push quick connect fittings. All these things have to go, and they'll be replaced with copper flare fittings. So one thing I do have that I want to add in and keep in there, this is a Schrader valve, kind of similar to a bicycle tire here, and this allows you to pre-fill these things so that these poor little pumps aren't running the whole time that you're trying to fill up the system. And not only that, you can also use an air line and maybe inflate a tire or something like that, so it can go in or out. But I don't want any of this plastic tubing in there, so I'm going to have to eliminate this too. And what I found is just an NPT elbow and then a Schrader valve just to go right on that. So we're still going to keep that, so that's good. So we have a way to get air in and out of the system easily. Just going to put that there. Leave our pressure switch here, probably take this 4-way out of there and plumb this directly to there through a 90-degree elbow. Should look pretty clean when we're done. Starting to do some plumbing in here, and you can see I got one set of valves here and another set that I kind of built here. The problem I see now is I have some collisions on some things, but mostly it's these pressure sensors here. I think what I want to do is I want to keep this as far back as possible. And if I screw this pressure sensor in there, and then you have like a pigtail that goes on top of that, you can see that somebody might be able to wipe that off of there, or somehow it would get damaged. So in this case too, there would be 2 pressure sensors that will be sticking out that far. So I think I want to relocate these maybe up further in here. As I said before, this is all kind of arbitrary. There's really, you just kind of have the space to work with and kind of have to make the lines around what you got. Here's the plastic airline. There's a lot going on up here. Here's the plastic airline that goes into the airbag itself. Kind of see it there. So what we want to do is pull this entire airbag out and then put a flare fitting on the top. But the problem is that probably going to have to grind some of this top bag mount out to get the flare fitting in there because it kind of takes up a lot of real estate. But that's okay. So I guess we'll get to taking that airbag out. Here you go, 2700 airbag. A little bit bigger than the 2500. But you can see it's got this small little push-tie plastic fitting on it. This is really no good for anything. I know that a lot of people really kind of rely on these and hey, they don't have any problems for years, but go change that out. We're going to use something like this. So here's a 45 degree flare. This is 1/2 inch MPT and 3 3/8 line here. But the problem is that by the time you get this on here, you get that screwed on there, and you can see the cutouts in the top plate there. Then you're going to have to come in with some copper tubing and connect that there. So you can see that pretty much all this metal from here to there Alright, so now we're going to bend some of this. So what you can use is something like this. It's just aluminum TIG rod. It's probably 3/32 or something like that, a little over a 1/16. And this is the side. This was the one that I bent for the other side. You can see it's got, I threaded a little 256 nut on the end. And this will kind of jam into there a little bit and kind of hold it in there a little bit. So you can see these are the bends that I had to make. So first thing you really need to do is just kind of get that bend right in there where the fitting is and kind of just approximate, maybe bend the tubing like that and stick it in there and see how close you are, and then kind of come around, make another bend, and then make another bend. And imagine we're going to have something that kind of looks like this when we're done, but never really going to know until you get it all fitted up. Okay, take that welding rod. You can see that I put it in the flared fitting out there. Kind of goes up into the car. Comes out right there. You can see that would be right about the right bends. You want to make sure that the line exits in the center of the hole there. And that looks pretty good. So carefully take this out. Alright, there we go. That's basically the shape. Let's see, follows that well. So just leave this end open so that we can cut it to length, and then flare this end. Well, a little bit proud there. Nice looking flare. Alright, let's go test fit this. Then we'll kind of get it where it's centered out. Make sure this is where we want it. Just like our template. Looks like I got this little long and it's pushing up against the metal in there, so there's not enough room to use a tubing cutter here. What you can do is you can take this razor knife here. I'm just going to cut the flare off right here and then reflare. There we go. This is the other side. Kind of a little easier to see here. So you can see how that fits pretty good in there. So I made this right here. It has 1, 2, 3 bends in it. So I think it'll connect there and then kind of jog around this frame here. It's going to bend that, and I decided not to. I'll cut it right about here. Okay, there you go. There's my straight piece of... Wait a minute, it's not straight. There we go. I'll take my straight piece of tubing here and kind of roughly figured out how long it needs to be. And we'll bend it up like this one. That looks pretty good. You can bend it a little bit like this, but I wouldn't really recommend it because what you're going to do is you're going to create maybe a bend in here. So just make sure that your bend is probably less than you need it. Then that way you can come back and adjust it a little bit later. But that looks really good according to what our template is. About where it needs to be. Maybe I could bend this back a little bit, change this angle a little bit, but for the most part it's pretty good. You just want to mark the end of the flare. You can kind of see both of those, they line up really well. And I'm having trouble getting this nut on a little bit. You can see this is kind of misaligned. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so there's your line. Now I just gotta do the same thing for the other side. Like that, it's nice and clean. 3 bends, staying out of everybody's way. All right, I got a little bit further. I got the copper lines all made. So now I got all the wires kind of gathering at one spot. Right here, I'll probably put the fuses and the relays right there next to that motor. But I think right now it's best time to do the wiring. So I have all this wiring cleanup to do, and so I'm probably going to have the stereo wires come in from that direction there and try to create as little evidence of any wires back here at all. Here are the parts ready to go in the car. It's kind of how I'm going to have it connect to tank, and then these new valves will go in here and replace these valves, which are really, in my opinion, terrible. These things here, I wired them so that they had a small little JST type plug in there. You know, I was kind of worried about the current in this wire. I measured this solenoid valve here, and it's like 1.4 amps, which, you know, it's kind of a incandescent bulb. I just want to kind of hold it on there for a minute and see if the wires get warm, and they're not. So that's probably the limit of this gauge of wire. I don't know whether it's 20 or something like that. But anyway, those will work definitely better than that. And then this started to melt down. So last time it was on, I unplugged the fuse and this thing didn't shut off. So I'm going to replace it with 2 other relays, and they're going to have a fuse. Each one of them is going to be fused, which is kind of interesting. I'm going to try this, and I think fuses are great, you know, in case, you know, you get the main one that fails that I have. Like this one here. This is the main fuse I have. I think it's about, what, 40, yeah, it's about 40 amp. And those work pretty good for, you know, this is fusing some 8 gauge wire here. But, you know, just a redundant fuse there. I'll probably drop this down to, I don't know, 10, 15 amp. This has a lot heavier gauge wire. I'm using 2 of them. And it's fused in the front. Probably take the 30 out, put something lower in it. But, yeah. That's good. That'll give me plenty of power without melting these things down. Wow, that was quite a bit of work, bending up all that copper tubing and making it fit in there. Especially when you have those sharp angles and sharp bends. I think this copper is going to work out really well as far as leaks and, you know, long life. Because as I said before, the last thing you want is an airbag system that's failed on you. Not going to be able to drive the car very far. So next week we'll work on troubleshooting this air system. I have a feeling there's going to be a few problems, maybe some leaks here and there, and we'll be able to see that and hopefully be able to find those things. I'm kind of getting excited for the outcome. Not quite sure if I want to do the fronts yet, but you know, just focusing on the rear, that's where I was having the trouble, was in the tank area, those 3 tanks kind of exchanging air correctly together and not leaking, and then the rear airbags being able to hold their position. And I think I did that. But we'll see next week. Thanks for watching. I'm going to start filling this thing up.